people have been asking me over morning tea about the wound on my forehead. I can assure you I'm not a victim of domestic violence at all. I'm happily married, but I grew up in the Queensland sun, and as a very fair-skinned descendant of Englanders, at my age, you've got to go and get a checkup from the dermatologist every now and then, and inevitably I'm being zapped or scraped, and it's a good thing. I don't know whether Archbishop Porteous is back in the room as yet. I think he said he would hang around with us for a little while, but I've just received a text message from Bernie Finn from his hospital bed, so that's a good sign, he's alive. But he's just reminded me that I think this weekend is the 50th anniversary of Archbishop Porteous' induction into the priesthood, if induction's the right word. So when he comes back, and we will acknowledge that, but he's probably enjoying a good, well-earned break out there in morning tea. So keep that as our little surprise, and we'll honour him later if he's back in the room. Ordination, thank you so much, yes. I've been hanging around politics for too long. They don't do ordinations in politics. Well, our next speaker is a very dear friend and someone who's made considerable effort to come back here again. He was with us last year, and that's Bob Mccoskrie, the CEO of Family First New Zealand. Now, Bob very kindly invited me to his conference earlier this year, and he asked me to send my slide deck over ahead of time. Very organised man that he is. But when I got to my speaking engagement, he'd doctored my slide deck. He'd manipulated it. So that was a real worry. So you just don't know what you might see when Bob presses this clicker in just a moment, but be on our guard. Just before I resume my introduction of my good friend Bob, Archbishop Porteous is coming down the aisle here, and Archbishop, I was just informing everyone that in the morning tea break I got a text from Bernie Finn, who is one of your parishioners, or parishioner of the Roman Catholic Church. He's our lead Senate candidate in Victoria, and yeah, great man, and he's sadly incapacitated in hospital today with a bad bout of pneumonia, but I think he's watching the live stream. He's still on Facebook, so there's signs of life, but he's just reminded me that it's the 50th anniversary of your ordination into the priesthood. And so, yeah. Sorry? Only 50 years, but that's a wonderful achievement of faithfulness to Christ and his church, and of course the leadership you show in the nation. We're all beneficiaries of it, so congratulations and thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us this weekend, so appreciate it. Well, back to Bob. Bob is the last line of resistance in New Zealand, a great nation which I have great affection for. Our daughter married a New Zealander and lives in Whangarei, north of Auckland, and has a son and another one on the way. So we have a vested interest in seeing the nation of New Zealand turn back from the brink. But Bob, over 20 years, around about 20 years ago, founded the Family First organisation. It's not a party, it's an advocacy group, and it really is pretty much the only voice in the country that is consistently and publicly and intelligently raising a voice for common sense about family. So Bob's the CEO. He's become a household name in that nation advocating for families. His social media release is astronomically. The mainstream media have basically blackballed him. He used to have a very high mainstream media profile, but they can't handle the truth. And so his social media numbers are through the roof. So the message is getting out, speaking common sense and values on a broad range of family issues. He seeks to promote strong families, marriage, the value of life, based on principles that have benefited New Zealand and, of course, Australia for generations. As well as being a dominant voice for family, he also provides a lot of research and education, and the quality of his research put into the New Zealand and the Antipodean context is extremely valuable. And Bob's come today. I offered to pay his airfares, but again, for the second year in a row, he's come very generously at his organisation's expense, and we trust you'll pass our thanks onto your board for that. But we appreciate your commitment to helping us and being an Anzac buddy in the fight. Would you please welcome Bob Mccoskrie? Yeah, I can do that.
Nice to be here. I hope you can understand my accent because it is the official language of heaven. So, so it has been a... Is this going? Check 1, 2, 2, 2. Test. Yep, there it is. So it has been a long day. I was up at 2 a.m. your time so that I could catch the flight to be here, and I'm on the 6 o'clock back. But I wanted to make it here, one, because I respect Lyle so much and love the work that he's doing, but two, because it is so important that we understand that you are not dealing with just an Australian issue, you're dealing with a cultural issue in Western culture. Now, when I told social media my social media followers that I was coming over here, I said that I was going to tell a really good, really funny Australian joke. Because whenever I come to Australia, I tell Australian jokes because they go down so well. In fact, I tell them in New Zealand as well because they go down even better. But anyway, here is my really funny Australian joke. Shocking. Sorry about that. Does anybody triggered by that? Right. I've got limited time. Billy Graham said that courage is contagious. When a brave man takes a stand, the spines of others are stiffened. As I thought about what you would be talking about here today, you are here because your spine is being stiffened by being associated with a political party, but you need to stiffen the spines of other people as well because our culture desperately needs it. If you were here last year, I did a bit of an expose on what the culture is going through, so apologies if a few of these slides you've seen before, but I do just want to cover it briefly because I think, we have to understand what we're actually tackling. And so, we have to understand that the culture has always been based on a deity, Agnus Dei. The problem is in our culture, we now have a new day in town. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And everybody's got to basically adopt it or you're in trouble. And businesses have to do it, being inclusive matters. And diversity, inclusion, and equity. Diversity is, of course, identity politics. It's based on what your gender, your sexuality, your attitude to the environment is, what race you are. Inclusion means that you're only included if you agree with the definitions of marriage, gender, and critical theory that they throw at you. And equity, of course, is, as we know, a form of Marxism. So what we're actually dealing with DEI, that you're dealing with in Australia, we're dealing with in New Zealand, the United States, Canada, UK, I could be doing this speech anywhere in the Western world that's based on Judeo-Christian values. It's the same thing we're all dealing with. And we're dealing with deception because you're being defined by your sexual politics or your racial politics. There's inequality because it's actually special rights for certain groups. And if you don't get into DEI, of course, you get cancelled. Now, I have been cancelled, as Lyle said. He laughed at that, but I told him it was coming his way. Being cancelled, a commentator once said that being cancelled is like going through puberty. You're dead scared of it, but once you've gone through it, it's awesome. And that's what being cancelled, because you can only be cancelled once, right? And the problem is that it goes totally, this whole critical theory, etc., is seeking to divide us. It's trying to put us into groups. And you've been put into a group as a result of even being associated with Family First. And yet Galatians clearly says that we are one. But there's this oppressor and oppressed. And of course, if we go through this list of checking your privilege as you came into the theatre, look, if you're able-bodied, you're that age, you're Christian, you believe in biology, that if you're born male, you are a male. If you're heterosexual, upper class and white, you are the problem. You are causing all the social problems in our culture, and everybody else is oppressed. And they've got intersectionality. So, someone like Lyle is stuffed because he has so much privilege oozing out. And Martin Luther King said that we should not be judged on the colour of our skin, but on the content of our character. Now, Melanie Phillips says, we're damned not on the content of your character, but on the colour of your skin. and especially if you're white. Now, what happens if you don't obey this new deity in town? You get cancelled, and hate speech legislation is necessary. The only reason they need hate speech legislation is because of the disbelief in DEI. When you think about it, hate speech only wants to shut down what type of view? Your view. Based on what? Judeo-Christian values. And so, and in fact, what's happening is it's not only Christians, people of faith that are being shut down. This is an article written by Professor Charlotte Paul. She's at Otago University. And she wrote about the whole issue around puberty blockers. And if you read the very first paragraph there, just there, it says, "I'm writing this article because my colleagues pleaded with me to do so. My younger colleagues in particular know they can't speak out because it could potentially damage their reputation." That's how desperate they are to shut down any disagreement to what I call the new cultural religion, the new deity in town. The conversion therapy bans, if you've got them in your state. Are we in a state with a conversion therapy ban? It's on the way. Why do they want it? It's a solution looking for a problem, because the problem isn't actually there, but they want to do it because they want to shut down any contrary view to diversity, equity and inclusion. And then if you're this guy, see, I found some Australians that had been persecuted. I thought it was only Lyle, but no, Andrew Thorburn was as well. You know this guy? Yeah. And he was sacked after 24 hours of just being the chairman of a AFL club, because it basically he went to a church that preached out of, guess what? The Bible. Shocking. Shocking. Can you believe it? What gall. And so in our culture, what we're seeing is, and this is what you're up against, and this is why you as a backbone need this party, and this party needs your backbone. Because the values, the Judeo-Christian values which have underpinned our cultures in all our countries is being destroyed. Now, I come from a radical group. Family First NZ was a charity, a bit like the ACL, and we were taken to court and deregistered. It took them 10 years. We went all the way to the Supreme Court. It cost us $750,000 fighting it. And I was fighting it not for us, because I don't give a stuff about charitable status, but I was fighting it because I knew that if they win against us, they'll then come against other religious groups and churches. But this is what the Supreme Court said. They said, family first advocacy of the role and importance of this particular version of the family, traditional natural family, and of marriage between a man and a woman is not beneficial. Supreme Court of New Zealand. But then they said this differs from advocacy for ends like human rights, aka DEI, and protection of the environment. And so any groups like that, Greenpeace is still a charity in New Zealand, even though they do similar style of work. What's happened in our culture? I would suggest to you two main things and then a sidebar. The first one is that our language has changed. Manipulation of the words. Dictionary word of the year for Oxford was post-truth. And you'll notice that it's not so much based on facts, it's based on feelings and personal belief. Then cancel culture came in, and you'll notice that anybody who's cancelled, generally it's because they've got views aligning with Scripture. Even non-Christians, like J.K. Rowling, is cancelled because her views align with a biological understanding of a male and a female. And then we woke up, and it's because we had to wake up to DEI. We have to be awake and know what DEI is and be worshipping it almost. Word of the year by Merriam-Webster a couple of years ago was they. Why? Well, they is a pronoun. It's used to refer to a single person whose gender identity is non-binary. So it's not he went for lunch, it's they went for lunch, even though it's one person. Manipulation of the language to take it away from a basic biological understanding. And then in 2022, we couldn't actually figure out what a woman was. I mean, I just say marry a woman and you'll soon find out, right? I know what a woman is. And the reason was because Biden appointed a black woman as a Supreme Court justice, and she was asked, what is a woman? And she says, well, I don't know, I'm not a biologist. It's sunny outside, but I'm not a meteorologist. But see, the language is being so manipulated that we can't state basic facts anymore. We can't say only mothers get pregnant. Are you allowed to say that in Australia? Because you can't say it in New Zealand. So words like truth, humility, love, discernment, words that we love, are being changed. Truth is becoming, well, no, it's your self-identity. It's not humility anymore, it's pride. It's not love, it's tolerating all things, no matter, even if it does harm and is not loving to the person. And it's not about discernment anymore of what is right and wrong, it's actually about rights. And so I believe we're heading into a culture which is just all about narcissism and hedonism. Narcissism is a lack of empathy, a need for admiration. If you don't think that's the case, just go and look at TikTok or Instagram. And hedonism, basically it's all about pleasure, and that is the highest good. And if you don't believe me on that, just go and watch mainstream TV. So we have this whole change, and so whereas we had basic values of in God we trust, now of course it's my body, my choice. These types of mantras, except for vaccines of course, but we won't go there, will we? Now, so that's the first thing that's happened. You weren't sweating there when I mentioned that, eh? So that's the first thing, manipulation of the language. Second thing that's happened is that our sources of information and truth have gone down the toilet. In New Zealand, the trust in media has plummeted to where only 1 in 3 New Zealanders trust the mainstream media. Now, I know for a fact that's probably the case in Australia. You're a little bit saved because you have got some slightly conservative media on your side, and like the States, they've got the Fox, and in the UK they have theirs as well. New Zealand is basically totally left-wing, which is why our social media is doing so well. But Massey University, so this was an AUT study, this one was an AUT study, Auckland University of Technology. So these are not my studies, these are not me asking or giving my opinion. This is Massey University, it's a world study of journalists, and they said, what are your political views? And we found out that basically 65% leaned left of centre in terms of their political views. Only 12% leaned right. So that is a major difference. So when we actually analysed all the media coverage when we had the conversion therapy law being passed, rammed through in New Zealand, and we analysed of all the mainstream media that it was 78% in favour of the law being passed. It wasn't a 50-50 or even a 60-40, let's hear both sides of the argument. 78. When Roe v. Wade was overturned, they just about manifested the mainstream media. 82% of them were crying and being triggered because women and unborn children actually had a right in the womb. So that's what's happening with the media. So those are the two major things. You know, one of the things that I've always wondered with the left is they are incredibly good at getting a turnout, aren't they? Whenever you hear about a left-wing march or protest, you just know there's going to be a great crowd there. Why is that? Well, the thing is that for us, we gather together sometime during the week. Generally, for most churches, it's Sunday morning, but there are variations. Some churches gather a number of times during the week. And it's a gathering. And I tell you what, the lefty liberals absolutely hate that idea that we're coming together and we're actually encouraging each other to counter the culture. And so when they have theirs, they turn up in numbers because it's their church. The new cultural religions church is the protest. And this was the protest, apologies for the words team, this is the one for Posey Parker. And, we've got these protests. And we've got CNN, this is a Black Lives Matter protest where there's been mayhem and injuries and businesses lost. And CNN says it's a fiery but mostly peaceful protest after a police shooting, which is probably why trust in the media has gone to an all-time low. And then all the symbols within our culture are changing as well. And so rather than this is being replaced by this. And of course, any reminder, and we talked about it just after I came in, I heard you talking about the Canberra hospital. They had to remove the cross. Why? Because it triggered them. It reminded them of what they're trying to replace in the culture. And we saw it at the Democratic National Convention a couple of weeks ago, where there were free abortions and vasectomies. Makes my eyes water just saying the word vasectomies. And they even had, they had this IUD, big blow-up IUD. And when I saw that, I thought of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being told to bow down to the culture. And they said they would not, even if the consequences, even if they got cancelled. So whereas we've grown up in a culture where reading to kids and encouraging them in values is important, they're now growing up where drag queens are telling them about their gender and sexualities. We have special holy days, don't we? A number of them. Those are being replaced in our culture by Pride Month. They just can't get long enough. We just had Pride Week, Ski Week in Queenstown, South Island. It went for 11 days. It wasn't even a week. They had to go 11 days. They don't want you to have children, okay, because you've got to save the planet and the kids leave a carbon footprint, so we don't want kids. And I think what I've realised in all of this is that we have to understand here today is that we don't actually battle against, I'm sure you can think of people that you really don't like in this debate. But we have to understand that behind that is actually what the issue is. It's not people. It's principalities and powers. And the principalities and powers are coming against the values that we hold dear because they represent everything that is of God. And so when the Manly Seven, just down the road from here, isn't it? Manly Seven, if I got my geo right. The Manly Seven refused to wear the Pride jerseys. We all heard about it. There was a massive furore. But I can guarantee that you haven't heard of Haneen Zrika or Andrisa Gay. Haneen Zrika plays for an AFL team. You probably can figure out which one it is in the women's division. And Andrisa Gay plays for Paris Saint-Germain. He now plays for a Premier League in the UK. Both of them refused to wear the Pride round jersey. But you didn't hear about it. Why not? Because they were Muslim. Now you've got to understand that in this cultural thing, it's not necessarily about the values that you hold, it's the source of your values. And they will turn a blind eye to other religious sources, but the Bible, the source of all truth, is their main threat. It's a new deity. During the euthanasia debate, we had an Islamic leader actually say that if Muslims chose euthanasia, they'd go to hell. Remember that other guy that said about going to hell? What was his name? Israel Flower something? Yeah. Now, this is the side one. And I'm stoked to be here with Your Excellency, Archbishop Julian, who we shared the stage speaking in Tasmania a couple of months ago, because I honour him, and I see there's a few other clergy here, because part of the problem is that those who should be defending the culture are the ones who have lost their backbone. And we've got to give it back to them. And so we've got this type of scenario where churches think that it's about love and about being kind and it's just about the gospel. It is. But it's also about speaking truth in love, because it's the truth that sets people free. And we're raising a culture that is losing their way with the truth. Just to give you an example, this is on the homepage of the college in New Zealand that trains Methodist ministers. And I grew up a Methodist. And it says this: we believe that the differences within our gender identity, male, female, transgender, non-binary and intersex, and sexual orientation, heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual and asexual, aren't deviances or abnormalities. Rather, these should be recognised and celebrated as God's creation. But heteropatriarchy and its doctrine of heteronormativity continue to demonise and criminalise. They use the Christian faith and the Bible to legitimise the violence. That is a Bible college. Now, the problem is, you could say, yeah, you Kiwis are stuffed. The problem is, I could probably look around Australia and I could look around Canada, UK and the US and find the exact same thing. Because the church, a lot of the church has lost their way. And they're not standing up. And I think in the discussion you said they were scared. They are scared. They saw what happened to Israel Folau when he quoted scripture. They saw what happened to the Christian schools. We've got our Christian schools that have been gone after because they believe marriage is one man, one woman. They saw what happened to churches, big churches, when there's been sin in the camp and the sin should be dealt with, but they've gone after the whole church and they've gone after scripture and everything associated with it. The big problem that we have to understand is that progressivism is secular. It rejects God because it's got a new deity. That means that our kids are growing up without truth and an understanding of who they are. They're confused. They're told they've got 112 genders, 200 plus sexualities. That's what kids in New Zealand are being told. They're being told that their race is important, and if you're white, they're the oppressor, and if you're not white, if you're Māori or Pacific Islander, you are the oppressed. But in the United States, Pew Research has found that actually people who are more liberal are more likely to suffer with mental health issues. And I believe it's because they're turning away from God, the source of truth, the source of healing, and the source of hope. Now, a lot of people say that, it's because, they had 4 years of Trump and it was, homophobia and transphobia city. The problem is that the deterioration started around the beginning of the 2010s, which was actually the same time as the smartphone and social media really came into play as well. So they had a very, what you'd call LGBT, DEI friendly government, and yet mental health still went through the floor. How long have I got? 5? Excellent. Let me tell you, I think you've lost count. I think I've actually got 17. Let me just... Lyle's sweating again. Let me just tell you a story. Jacinda, everybody knows Jacinda Ardern, eh? She's that really popular new Prime Minister from New Zealand who we all couldn't wait to see the back of, but the rest of the world thinks she was really popular in New Zealand. Hint, she wasn't. Very unpopular. But anyway, she decided to get engaged, and at the engagement, she actually said to the media, okay, we bought a house, we had a kid, now we're getting engaged, we've sort of got things round the wrong way. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting statement to come out. So I did a what we call a Family Matters, where I talked about it's great that she's getting married, marriage still matters, it will matter to Neve, her child, it's important to the culture, and talked about statistics. A follower, who I didn't know at the time, just commented, and this is actually on LinkedIn, which is one of the more mature social media platforms, said, wonderful to see the PM supporting traditional marriage, confirming it is between a man and a woman. Well, the next day he got a letter from the HR department. If you have an HR department in your workplace, I challenge you to check how diverse, equitable and inclusive it is by going and saying marriage is between a man and a woman, and you'll find out how DEI it really is. But anyway, HR contacted him and said, you posted comments on LinkedIn, you've possibly breached social media policy, and down the bottom there you'll say, look, you may end up with a first warning because we didn't like it. Now, he had to turn up to a meeting. He was allowed to take a support person. Unfortunately for them, the guy invited me. And so we turn up to the meeting, and while we're sitting there, and he's being told off by the HR lady, basically saying, why are you posting this stuff? Why are you speaking up? Keep your views to yourself. You're bringing our company into disrepute. And so while she's saying this, and he's got his tail between his legs, I thought to myself, have a look at her social media. So I did. When the Holy Spirit prompts you, always do what it says. And guess what I found? I found that she was, at the time, promoting the yes in the cannabis referendum. She wanted to legalise drugs. She wanted people to go to the Helen Clark Foundation, which is a lefty charity, which isn't deregistered because it doesn't believe marriage is a man and a woman. And she was also a big supporter of the Green Party. And so we just pushed back, and we just said, why are you pushing on this employee when you've got your own views and you're doing them on social media? He never heard another thing. Now, the moral of the story is we've got to push back. Part of the problem for us is that we mentioned it during the discussion, we've been a bit too nice. And yeah, I agree with you that our strategy is that we come across respectful, we what's the saying? We play the ball and not the man or the woman, if we can figure out which one is which. I agree with that. I think that's the key, because when you go nasty and sharpish, I think you lose your audience. But the problem is, I think we've gone to the other extreme where we've been so backwards and coming forward and so nice that we've actually failed to speak truth into the culture. And if I look at the culture, they are desperate for truth. They are desperate for the types of policies that you guys are trying to push. And we need them. We need parties like this throughout all the westernized cultures that I'm talking about, but they are lacking. Because what I've found is that when conservative parties get into power, and we've got the same problem with our New Zealand one right now, we biffed out a radical left-wing government, and we've got what was supposed to be a conservative right-wing government, but they are so weak on social conservative issues that they're almost centre of left on social conservative issues. Our work hasn't changed a bit. Luxon, our Prime Minister, went into the election saying he just wanted abortion off the issue. He didn't want to talk about it, even though he said he was pro-life and went to a strong Christian church before he was nominated as leader of the party. He said, abortion is off the table, we will not change that law. We've got one of the most radical in the world. He said, I'll resign before I change that law. It is, it's shameful. And yet, unfortunately, that's what happens. Just one other example. Somebody sent me this, and it was a school notice, and it said, this is a notice to kids in a high school. The gender-affirming healthcare grant is now live. If you would like to apply for financial help with gender-affirming healthcare, go to the Google form on the school portal. So I fired off a Official Information Act request to the school principal and said, who's paying for this? Who's basically assessing the children in need? Where's the money coming from? How many have applied for it? Are you going to do, cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers? Are you going to send kids off to get mastectomies, etc.? Now, in New Zealand, with an Official Information Act request, you have it, they've got to reply within 20 working days. I got an email back within 2 hours from the principal saying, yeah, this shouldn't have been in the notices. It was put in by a student body. I've requested them to remove it. And so I just replied and I said, end of matter. Thank you for dealing with it. Now, it's just another example of where we can sit and complain, which I know we're all very good at because we've spent our whole lives doing it, or you can come to a conference like this and say, right, what are you asking me to do? I've got some backbone. I want to make some changes. I think this is surveys that we have done in New Zealand around the whole transgender issue, for example, and whether trans people should be playing as well. How long have I got? 0 minutes. Oh, no, that's 4. That's 3. Suffice to say, it's tipping, I think. I think the culture is actually realising what's happening because of our rejection of God and our culture. Now, we need to keep reminding them. We need to keep reminding them and speaking it. This was a hate crime campaign that they had in Scotland. And they did all these sheets that talked about dear transphobes, dear homophobes, dear disableists, dear racists, dear bigots. But look at that bit that I circled. They made a little, kind of faux pas admission of what they really think because they said, end of sermon. I mean, that's a subtle dig of saying, keep your views to yourself. And so this is the message that I really want to leave you with in the negative 2 minutes that I've got. Has the tape been off your mouth, and are you going to take it off? Because the culture needs you to take it off. We've got to start speaking up. Sure, we've got to speak the truth in love, but we've got to start speaking the truth in love. We've got to get some backbone. If you leave your children a world where you never stood up, they'll inherit a world where they can't. And I worry that we're getting to that point. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego says, no matter the consequences, we're not going to bow down to the culture. That's me.
Thanks very much, Bob. Just our time is short, but I just want to ask Bob one very quick question. And we don't want to take up from the other speakers, but you mentioned during the break the latest outrage that's just broken today in New Zealand, which is quite shocking. Do you want to just quickly tell us about that?
Yeah, so during the week we became aware of a study that's being done through Victoria University, which is a university in Wellington, and they have decided they're going to study paedophilia and the stigma associated with that and how we can be nicer to pedophiles.
Yeah.
They don't call it paedophilia. That's a word you don't use. That's a manipulation of the language. They call it, child-attracted persons or minor-attracted persons. It's all part of the plan. It started with Kinsey and it's just continuing.
Yeah.
So we exposed it. The mainstream media, we exposed it on Tuesday. The mainstream media, one outlet has only just started it today, and that's the Wellington-based one, probably because they had no choice. So that's just it. They didn't want to be involved with it. And that's my encouragement to you as a party. You're not going to get mainstream coverage, and if you do get any, you're going to get negative mainstream coverage, right? Start using the alternative media that is available. Start supporting, start liking, start getting people to join, share the stuff, because that's where the real media is, and we've got to create that greater media. That's why I take my hat off to people like Elon Musk.
No. Yeah, great stuff. Bob, thank you so much. Bob, we've got a small token of our appreciation for you. Yeah. It's duty free. Yeah, you don't have to declare it. Please thank Bob Mccoskrie.